Welcome to this history presentation about three Irishmen who lost their lives while in police custody 100 years ago during the War of Independence. My name is James Curry and I'm a Dublin City Council historian in residence. I would like to thank Dublin Castle and the Office of Public Works for inviting me to give this online presentation, which is dedicated to the memory of Richard McDermott, who passed away unexpectedly at his Dublin home in January 2019. Richard worked for the OPW for many years and can be seen here in his element while giving a tour to some school children at the Casino Marino in May of 2015. I spent 8 months working alongside Richard at Dublin Castle in 2018, and he was somebody with a great sense of humour. I have this sketch to remember him by, his depiction of me giving a James Connolly themed tour of the castle on the 12th of May. Dick McKee, Peadar Clancy and Clune were three Irish Republicans who lost their lives in a Dublin Castle guard room 100 years ago. Their deaths took place at the height of the Irish War of Independence, which had broken out between Ireland and England in January 1919, with the setting up of the first Dáil Éireann by Sinn Féin at the Dublin Mansion House on the 21st of January 1919. The same day that several policemen were shot dead during an ambush in Soloheadbeg, County Tipperary. So 1919 was a very turbulent year in Irish history, and things will get even worse in 1920 with the arrival of the notorious Black and Tans and the auxiliaries to assist the Royal Irish Constabulary in dealing with Irish Republicans. It will become known to many people as the Year of Terror, due to events such as the sacking of Balbriggan in North County Dublin, the burning of Cork City, the execution of Kevin Barry, the death of hunger striker Terence MacSwiney, and of course Bloody Sunday. The 21st of November 1920 was a particularly violent day during the War of Independence, with a total of 32 people killed or mortally wounded in Dublin. 15 of these were British intelligence officers or alleged spies and informers who were shot by the IRA that morning, mainly in South Dublin. All were male, and here you can see photographs of 11 of those killed. If we don't get them, they will get us was very much the reasoning of Michael Collins regarding this large-scale operation, and Collins later insisted that his conscience was clear over the removal during a time of war of what he referred to as undesirables. In retaliation for these shootings, the British military, auxiliaries and the Royal Irish Constabulary searched and ransacked houses across Dublin while hunting for the perpetrators. And then that afternoon at Crow Park, a crowd of up to 15,000 people were fired upon by the British Crown Forces during a friendly Gaelic football match between Dublin and Tipperary, which had been organised for the benefit of the relatives of imprisoned or dead Republicans. 14 civilians were killed that afternoon, including 2 young children, a woman and a Tipperary football player, Michael Hogan. The authorities insisted that the Crown Forces were fired upon first inside the sports ground after they had arrived to search all male spectators. But most people rejected this and believed that it was a cover-up, and what happened that afternoon was a reprisal attack for what occurred in Dublin earlier that day. So you had a total of 29 people killed or mortally wounded on the morning and afternoon of Sunday the 21st of November 1920. And there would be 3 more lives lost in Dublin later on Bloody Sunday, or it seems during the early hours of Monday the 22nd of November. Dick McKee, Peadar Clancy and Clune. Now, at the time of his death, Dick McKee was in charge of the IRA's Dublin Brigade. So he was a very important figure within the Irish Republican movement during the War of Independence era. And Peadar Clancy was his second in command, the Dublin Brigade's vice commandant. So 2 senior figures within the IRA whose deaths came as a real blow to the Dublin Brigade. Clune, as we'll see, was nowhere near as prominent a figure. Now, it's normally said that McKee was born in April 1893, but I think that's actually a year out, and that this is his birth cert. Here, you'll notice it's missing a Christian name. It shows that he was born at the Rotunda Hospital. His father was a gardener, and the McKees would live at several Dublin addresses, as well as a spell living in Leitrim before settling in Finglas following the death of Dick McKee's father. McKee joined the Irish Volunteers when that organisation was founded in 1913, and he enlisted as a member of the Dublin Brigade's G Company 2nd Battalion. He was a natural leader of men and soon placed in charge of this company. And during the 1916 Easter Rising, Dick McKee was part of the Jacob's Biscuit Factory garrison under the command of Thomas MacDonagh. After the Easter Rising, McKee was imprisoned in British jails for several months. And once back in Ireland, he rose rapidly through the ranks of the Irish Volunteers and became the officer commanding of the Dublin Brigade, as well as being appointed to the General Headquarters staff of the Volunteers as a Director of Training. So somebody who really was very important in the years after the Easter Rising. In March of 1918, he was arrested while training his battalion at field work in North County Dublin and sentenced to 3 months imprisonment. The following year, in November 1919, he was arrested again and once more spent 3 months in prison. Upon release, he resigned from his printing job to focus solely on his Republican activities and entered what would prove to be the final stages of his life. Having narrowly escaped arrest the previous month, McKee was captured on the 20th of November 1920 at a Gloucester Street, or Sean McDermott Street as it is now, safe house along with Peadar Clancy, shortly after they had left Vaughan's Hotel on Parnell Square West due to a raid that was taking place. Both men had met with Michael Collins and other senior Republicans to go over the assassination plans for the next morning. There was a plaque at the building on Sean McDermott Street where McKee and Clancy, as well as the person who lived there, Sean Fitzpatrick, were arrested. Fitzpatrick would survive to fight another day. The 2 others, however, along with Clune, who had been arrested during the initial raid at the Vaughan's Hotel, would not be so lucky. And the British authorities released a statement about the deaths of the 3 men while they were in police custody, claiming that they were killed in an attempt to escape after getting hold of undetonated bombs, a rifle and a large shovel. This written account, which was completely rejected obviously by the men's families and Irish nationalists, it was reinforced with the release of 2 photographs reconstructing the British authorities' version of events. And instead of succeeding, these very staged images only made members of the Irish public even more suspicious. Here we can see now the second of those images, purporting to show how Dick McKee had been foiled in his attempt to escape through a cell window. Within a week, Dáil Éireann was reporting that the three prisoners had been tortured and murdered by auxiliary members of the Royal Irish Constabulary as a reprisal attack for the British casualties suffered on the morning of Bloody Sunday. McKee's sister claimed that her brother was stabbed as well as shot. Another witness alleged that McKee's ribs were broken and that his torso had been ripped to shreds with bayonets. It was also claimed that Peadar Clancy was shot in the head at point blank range and had his legs crushed, and that Conor Clune had his skull smashed by a shovel and been shot over a dozen times. Now, officially, Dick McKee's death certificate, you can see here, states that he was killed on Monday the 22nd of November while attempting to escape from Dublin Castle. His cause of death was registered as shock and hemorrhage due to bullet wounds fired by members of the Auxiliary Division, RIC, in self-defence and in execution of their duty, i.e. in preventing the escape of deceased who was in their lawful custody. This information was received from a military court of inquiry held at King George V Hospital, City of Dublin. And the same information is given for Peadar Clancy and Conor Clune. Now, McKee and Clancy were buried in Glasnevin Cemetery with a large funeral procession marching from the Pro Cathedral on Marlborough Street. The fact that so many Republican figures attended the funeral at great risk, including Michael Collins, shows the esteem which both men were held in by their peers. Collins ensured that both men were buried in military uniform. He was devastated at the loss of his good friends, whom he described in a memorial wreath message as two of Ireland's best soldiers. The loss of its primary wage earner left the McKee family in Finglas in precarious circumstances, and the Irish state would have to provide some financial assistance over the coming years after independence. Dick McKee was also awarded several military medals as well. And in terms of public ways that McKee has been remembered, well, in 1926, the former Marlborough Barracks over near the Phoenix Park in Dublin 7 was renamed after him, with a bronze bust of McKee by the Irish artist Lawrence Campbell unveiled in the officers' mess there in March of 1951. There's also this painting of McKee in the NCO's mess at the barracks, which is located close to McKee Park and McKee Court in Dublin 7. Now, in Finglas, where McKee lived for many years, he has also been very well remembered, as well as the existence for a long time of a McKee memorial pipe band, which you can see photographed here in the 1940s. There is McKee Road and McKee Avenue. And then there's this 15-foot McKee memorial that was unveiled in Finglas Village by Eamon de Valera during the summer of 1951. And I've just uploaded a short presentation on this 15-foot Celtic cross on my Statues of Dublin YouTube channel for anyone who'd like to learn more about it. Dick McKee, like Peadar Clancy and Conor Clune, never married, but he was engaged at the time of his death to this woman here, Commemorating member and Republican activist May Gibney. This photograph is held by the Commemorating Jail Museum and can be seen here colorized by Matt Lockray. Uh, Although she married another Irish volunteer named Lawrence O'Neill, who was in the Carlow Brigade, May never forgot her former fiance or the other senior IRA man he died alongside. This ring that you can see her wearing uh, was kept in a treasure box, and it carried a very simple inscription: Dick and Peadar, 21 November 1920. We'll move on to the second of those names now. Peter or Peadar Clancy. Like Dick McKee, an important figure within the Republican movement 100 years ago. He was born and raised within a large family in County Clare, and during his youth became involved with the Gaelic League, hence why he became known as Peadar, as he liked to speak Irish. And regarding his date of birth, the Dictionary of Irish Biography and some other sources say he was born in 1886. A biography of Clancy that was published 4 years ago by a couple of relatives says the 9th of November 1888. Well, I found this birth cert suggesting that he was actually born in November of 1889. He was a draper by trade, and Clancy moved to Dublin when he was in his 20s and soon became a partner in the Republican Outfitters store at number 94 Talbot Street. Now, with a name like that, you can guess the type of clientele that this store attracted and why it so regularly came under the watchful eye of the British authorities. It was outside here that the IRA's Sean Tracy was killed in a gun battle on Talbot Street 5 weeks before Bloody Sunday, and a commemorative plaque was installed there by the National Graves Association in 1937. Clancy had joined the Irish Volunteers following its founding in 1913, like Dick McKee, and during the Easter Rising 3 years later, it was part of the Four Courts garrison, for which he was sentenced to death, despite not being one of the leaders. Now, after the Rising, he was taken to Richmond Barracks with the other rebel prisoners, where these two mugshot photographs were taken, before Clancy was court-martialed and imprisoned in England. It's nice to have a look at the high-definition colorized version of the photographs that was recently carried out by Old Ireland in colour. Now, his sentence was later commuted to 10 years penal servitude after the Rising, but he would be released as part of a general amnesty in 1917 and went on to become, as we've seen, the vice commandant of the IRA's Dublin Brigade. During the War of Independence, he also served as a director of munitions on the IRA's general headquarters, so an important figure within the Republican movement. In April 1920, he went on hunger strike with other Republican prisoners at Mountjoy prison, leading by example and managing to get released after 10 days. And one of the other hunger strikers later wrote that during this period, Clancy gave the impression of being a superman, somebody who was really a charismatic leader that led by example. After his release from prison and recovering, Clancy once more threw himself into the armed struggle for independence and eventually lost his life a century ago, shortly after his arrest, as we've seen with Dick McKee at Sean McDermott Street. Now, in terms of how he has been commemorated, well, in Finglas, once more, there is Clancy Road, Clancy Court and Clancy Avenue, named in his honour, while in his native County Clare, there is also a bronze bust with an Irish language plaque, as well as a memorial at his old national school that was unveiled in 2016 and features him at the centre in bronze, holding a rifle and leading the way in front of the Dublin Four Courts. A Peadar Clancy festival also takes place in Clare every year. We can finish up now with a look at Conor Clune, the most overlooked of the three men who were killed 100 years ago. Seen here in this rather haunting portrait by the Irish artist Harry Kernoff. Regarding Clune's date of birth, he was born on the 26th of July 1893 in the small village of Quin, County Clare. And you can see here that his name was actually Cornelius. His father was a carpenter, his mother, whose maiden name was Walsh, the daughter of a farmer. And it was a large Roman Catholic family, with the parents, John and Bridget Clune, having approximately 11 children together, 9 surviving to adulthood. Now, in his youth, Conor Clune was educated locally and joined the Gaelic League, speaking Irish whenever he got the opportunity. The 1901 census shows him aged 7, with his Christian name listed as Corny, living in Quin with his parents and 6 siblings. And a decade later, in the 1911 census, he's now 17 years old, listed as Cornelius Clune, still a scholar, living in Quin with his parents and 7 siblings. Now, at some point afterwards, Clune spent some time living and working in Dublin before becoming manager of a cooperative stores in the townland of Raheen, County Clare, close to the village of Quin. This was a business owned by the McLysaght family, and it was with a member of that family, Dr. Edward McLysaght, who was connected with the IRA's East Clare Battalion, that Clune travelled to Dublin by car on Saturday, the 20th of November 1920. That same evening, Clune was arrested by the auxiliaries during a raid at Vaughan's Hotel at 29 Parnell Square West, where he had gone to meet with a man to discuss Gaelic League business, it seems, and also to meet with Pierce Beasley, the IRA's Director of Publicity and an elected TD in the first Dáil. One eyewitness later claimed that Clune decided not to try and escape when the raid began, instead remarking calmly to another man, "We can die for Ireland as well as anybody else." Clune was placed in the same exchange court police cell at Dublin Castle as Dick McKee and Peadar Clancy, who had narrowly escaped the raid at Vaughan's Hotel, but being tracked to a safe house at John McDermott Street, belonging to Sean Fitzpatrick, as we've seen, and arrested. Just before the arrest took place, they managed to destroy the lists of names of the people who were to be assassinated on the morning of Bloody Sunday. But the 2 men were fairly well known to the authorities. So once they were arrested, it was clear their lives would be in danger, especially after the events of Bloody Sunday morning. Now, as we saw earlier, there is a bronze plaque marking the location. This was erected by the North Inner City Folklore Project, and it commemorates 2 Irish patriots who gave their lives for Irish freedom. At the bottom of the plaque, the killing of Conor Clune is mentioned, and he is described as an IRA volunteer. Now, there has always been confusion about the extent of Clune's Republican credentials. Material contained in an application for a military service pension that was made in the 1950s by his sister Margaret indicates that he was a member of the IRA for several years before his death, serving with the 4th Battalion of the East Clare Brigade, mainly as an intelligence officer, or at least with a Tuam company attached to the East Clare Brigade, Tuam being a place in the east of Clare. This statement was accepted, and Margaret Clune was awarded a partial dependence allowance. The state also posthumously awarded Conor Clune a medal for his IRA service. So while he may not have been a prominent figure within the movement, like the other two Dublin Castle victims during that weekend 100 years ago, and he had no idea what was going to take place on the morning of the 21st of November 1920. Conor Clune was somebody who did his bit for an Irish Republic during the War of Independence era, and I think he was a person who, while not willing to kill for Ireland, was certainly willing to die for his country. One East Clare commandant described him as a sort of freelance liaison officer who served the IRA in every way possible. After his death, the remains were returned to Clare on Thursday the 25th of November, with the funeral taking place the next day. Clune was buried in the family plot of the beautiful medieval Queen Abbey, and a British officer seemingly prevented the coffin from being draped in a tricolour flag. 50 years after his death, this Irish language memorial tablet was placed over Conor Clune's grave. While here in Dublin, there is a Conor Clune Road near the Phoenix Park, as well as a Clune Road in, yes, Finglas Dublin 11. Now in 1939, the National Graves Association of Ireland arranged for this limestone plaque commemorating McKee, Clancy and Clune as martyrs who gave their lives for the cause of Irish independence above the door of the former Detective Department guard room at number 1 Exchange Court next to City Hall and Dublin Castle. Interestingly, until a couple of years earlier, this space had been occupied by a royal coat of arms, i.e. the lion and the unicorn. But this was blown up by Republicans on the 11th of November 1937. Thanks to Donald Fallon for revealing this in an article for the Come Here To Me website. In August 1965, the secretary of the IRA's Dublin Brigade, a man called Thomas McCarthy, wrote to the Taoiseach at the time, Sean Lemass, to lament the deplorable state that the cell had been in when they recently brought a family to see it during a Dublin Castle event. And he called for the cell to be put in proper order, for a suitable inscription to be placed in the cell or on the door, and also that a notice should be placed at the top of the passage indicating whereabouts in the building the cell was situated. McCarthy quickly received an encouraging letter in response from the Taoiseach's office indicating that these suggestions will be given full consideration by the Minister for Finance in charge of the OPW. Alas, the building in question was later sold and is no longer in state ownership. So that building of number 1 Exchange Court next to City Hall is no longer part of the sprawling Dublin Castle complex. Now, their deaths will always be overshadowed by the morning and afternoon events of Bloody Sunday 100 years ago. But the trio of Dick McKee, Peadar Clancy and Conor Clune have not been forgotten. If you would like to learn more about the events of Bloody Sunday, I would urge you to check out the dublincity.ie website, where you can download a free copy of this new book of essays about the subject, entitled History on Your Doorstep Volume 3. There will also be a limited amount of copies made available for free in Dublin City branch libraries once they reopen. And at the dublincity.ie website, you can also access a reading list of books and websites and podcasts to consult, as well as seeing a small online exhibition. And I will just point out also that in the last few days, a blog about Bloody Sunday has been uploaded to the Dublin Castle website. Thanks very much for watching.